Hi, I'm Hugh Carroll, Head of Marketing with 42Crunch, and I'll be your moderator for today's session on how you can conduct API security testing inside Postman with 42Crunch. We're very happy to welcome Kin Lane, Chief API Evangelist with Postman, to co-present today. I first met Kin several years ago when he was a Presidential Innovation Fellow with the US Department of Veteran Affairs, and I've been eagerly tracking his involvement in the industry ever since, so very pleased to have you here today, Kin. We're also joined by our co-speaker, 42Crunch's field CTO and co-founder, Isabel Moni. Kin and Isabel, in addition to their day jobs, are also involved with the OpenAPI initiative. They co-chair the business governing board there and are helping to accelerate the evolution of this important and influential industry specification. So what they don't know about APIs and protecting them isn't really worth knowing. Before I hand over to our presenters, I'd just like to conduct a quick polling question to set the tone for today's session. There's no right or wrong answer. Just select the answer that best represents your understanding of your situation, particular to you and your role. And we'll let everybody see the question. And if you can all have a stab at answering it to the best of your understanding, and then we share the results momentarily once all the votes are in. So hopefully you can see the questions there. I can see lots of folks submitting answers. That's great. Interesting, very interesting. Almost neck and neck there. Preferred format for importing APIs into Postman is just out in front of the collections, followed hot on its heels by OpenAPI. Little bit of WSDL, a little bit of RAML, and then some others. So some interesting content there for you, Kin, to maybe lead off with. And I'll hand you over to Kin now.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh, for that. Interesting. It's interesting to see the neck and neck between collections and OpenAPI there, but it's good to see because I think there's an overlap between what they do, but they're definitely kind of have some different characteristics that you'll see as part of our webinar today in how you can work with them and put them to work across the API lifecycle. So thanks 42Crunch for doing this with me. This is awesome. I want to really highlight the importance of API security as part of the API lifecycle, but more importantly, I would say an API first lifecycle. But let's let me get my screen working. There we go. So I'm Kin Lane. I'm Chief Evangelist from Postman. Hey, Isabel, you wanna jump in and introduce yourself, or do you wanna?
I'll do it. It's fine. Yeah, I'm Isabel. That's okay. We'll continue later. Thanks, Kin.
All right. But I'm Chief Evangelist with Postman, and I'm going to walk you through kind of API first approach to looking at how to design and develop an API, but deliver it across the API lifecycle. And then I'm going to dive into the testing portion, which security is a critical part of, and that's when I'm going to hand things over to Isabel. So I wanted to be able to walk through and demonstrate how I'm seeing security move up the API lifecycle for the 15 million developers that I see use the Postman platform on a regular basis. So this, as you saw from the poll, a growing number of developers' lifecycle is OpenAPI defined. They're mocking their APIs, they're documenting them, and then they're collaborating on the design of those APIs until they get a contract that represents what is intended with this API before it goes into production. And then we develop a suite of contract and performance testing, and then Isabel's going to dive into how you can also secure that contract. So real quick on how did we get here? Well, since eBay and Amazon first started using the web, in a different way other than just delivering websites via HTML, we've seen an explosion of APIs. And starting around 2007-08 with the cloud, and then with mobile phones, it just really picked up pace there. So as we see now today, everything's an API. They're behind every application that we use in our personal and professional lives, making it something that every business, you're no longer just tech companies, have to wrestle with how to do APIs or how to do them properly. And in reality, you know, if you work in the space, you know that a lot of companies move fast. A lot of companies have a lot of legacy infrastructure. And honestly, most APIs are just poorly built and difficult to use, which opens up a pretty large security hole when it comes to operations. And as we see week after week from the different vulnerability and breach disclosures, that APIs are an increasingly part of that. And you know, the design and delivery of these APIs is why this is happening. So one way of doing APIs that we've seen emerge in the last couple of years is what we call an API first approach. But really, this is just born out of what's called an API last approach. So where companies have a need, they have a website, a mobile application, some sort of integration with a partner they need, and they focus on that. And then they deliver an API as part of that, but there's no real strategy to how you're delivering that API. It's not part of any bigger picture. And so it's really an API last approach. You want to deliver this application, and you're delivering an API to satisfy that. So over the last 5 years, you see a lot of folks really start showcasing an API first approach. So where you actually think and design the API in a collaborative way at the beginning of the life cycle, and then you use it in different websites, mobile applications, and integrations. But really, the API is designed and delivered as part of a larger strategy. So the key to doing this in Postman, and the poll kind of revealed that, is using OpenAPI as well as Postman collections to help define each API, but also move it forward throughout the API lifecycle. And there's no better way to explain this than to jump out of the presentation and let's go into an actual workspace. So let me zoom in a bit to try to make it easier for folks to see. So I'm in a Postman workspace, and this is actually a public workspace, so you can find it. I'll share these out via Twitter and as part of the show notes. This is a public API workspace for working on a products API. So to kick things off, we've published a basic product API using OpenAPI, and this allows us to describe the surface area of the API we're designing or we're going to deploy without writing any code first. So you can start with a really basic template, and you've got the basic outlines of, you know, what are the paths, what are the different schemas, and what are the security schemes in place. And so we want, this is API design first. So we're choosing to design our API first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to invite our team members to come here. We can invite as many folks as we want to either view or actually collaborate and iterate on this API contract with us. And then folks can jump in around this OpenAPI definition and either start making changes, or they can jump into comment mode and they can actually start leaving messages about this OpenAPI and have a conversation here. But this becomes even more powerful once you realize you can actually start threaded conversations about specific properties. So if you want to actually just talk about this description, and why is my toolbar keep dropping? Here we are. So if I want to talk just about this operation ID, I can mention a teammate, and I can actually start a conversation just about this individual property. And so we can collaborate and iterate on this. But one thing that's going to make this a little bit more real and tangible is if folks go generate collections. So this gives you a little relationship, you know, per the survey, the relationship between open APIs and collections is you can use the OpenAPI contract to generate mock servers or documentation or testing for the API. I've already got a handful deployed here. And so I've got my documentation, and this gives me my kind of common 3-panel documentation that shows each of the endpoints, parameters, and all the details that we're defining in that OpenAPI specification. And then I went ahead and I've mocked this using another collection. This could be done as the same collection, but this allows me to actually choose my mock server and actually make requests to this mock server and see how the API should behave when it's in production. And then to make changes, all I've got to do is change the examples beneath each individual endpoint. So if I want to change this product example response, I can edit the example here and I will see it in action. And then if it's ever out of sync with our OpenAPI contract, we'll get notifications up here. And this allows us to design our central contract here using our OpenAPI. And then we can generate docs and mocks to make it a little more tangible. But then we can continue iterating on the design of this API, making changes while keeping them in sync. So if any issues are found, it will alert it and it will allow us to reconcile those differences. And so that allows us to iterate on this back and forth with our team. And then once we get the OpenAPI contract to a point where did my OpenAPI contract go? So when we get the API contract back to a state where we feel like it's done and ready for development, we can add in contract tests, we can add in performance tests, and then we can start considering security tests, and all before we start developing it. So we haven't even finished iterating upon this. We just feel like it's to a point where it's getting close to being done. We can run contract tests to make sure. So if I hit the endpoint and I see the test results, I've got a suite of tests. Is it valid 200 status code? Does it have a body? Is it valid JSON? And then does it match our JSON schema that's specified in the OpenAPI? So these contract tests should work when we're put this into production, and I can run this collection as a monitor on a schedule. So I can choose this collection, choose which environment, my mock or my production or development, and then I can watch it on a schedule from any region. I can also run it as part of a CI/CD pipeline. And this is one of the reasons I create separate collections for my docs, my mocks, and my contract performance and security tests, is you can then run these collections individually on a schedule or as part of a pipeline. And so I'm not even ready to put this into production. We've just got the contract where we want to be. And one of the things we're seeing with more of our customers is they're wanting, before this goes into development, they're wanting those contract tests in place. They're wanting performance tests in place. And then they're increasingly wanting security scanning and testing to be done before it ever moves forward any further. And this is all of this, the docs, the mocks, the testing is all driven from this OpenAPI contract. So that's my API first demo, kind of showing you how you can start with a contract first API design process. You can iterate on it within a team environment. You can even do it publicly if you want. You can generate mocks, docs, and tests. But then I'll hand it over to Isabel to actually apply security and dive into how the security testing is applied to the contract.
Well, thank you.
Great, thanks, Ken. Just before, sorry to jump in there, Isabel. Just before we jump into Isabel's session, I'm going to push another polling question to the audience. I know some of you are asking questions on the chat as well. We'll get back to you momentarily on that, but a recording will be made available tomorrow, so don't worry about that. Okay, so the next question is a multiple choice, and it's relating to the testing capabilities that you use Postman for. So obviously a natural segue from the previous session from Kin. And it's really, what testing capabilities do you use Postman for? And there's multiple choice here, so you can answer on more than one, obviously. So probably not unexpected. Functional tests out in front, performance tests, security, not bad, well done. So it's a good spread there. And indeed, you know, this is not exclusive, so it's probably being used for all of the above, but a large percentage of you way out in front there with functional testing. Okay, I'll stop sharing and back to you, Isabel.
Thank you. we left off, where Ken explained brilliantly about API contract and the OpenAPI definition and taking an API first approach. We couldn't be more aligned here on the approach to take, right? Now my question is, how secure is this API contract? So we've seen we can do API contract testing against your implementation, make sure that the answers that come back or the data we're sending actually conform to that contract. But that means also that you have to be sure that this contract is as good and as precise as possible, as rich as possible in terms of security. And this is really where we come in with a tool that is very complementary to what Postman is actually doing. We are focusing this service of our 42Crunch platform into analyzing now your contract from a security standpoint, which is, it has a lot of aspects. I'll show you in the demo, like type of findings that we have. But it's about looking at what is the security that you have declared in there. Is it an API key? Is it auth? Is it basic auth? What kind of transport are you using? So everything related about the pure security aspect and transporting the credentials for your security. But more importantly, and actually this is where the bulk of the findings usually are, and where this is going to really, I would say, change or impact the quality and the security of your contracts, is how well is the data defined. So all this information that we're expecting through our API, all this information that we are returning through our API, how precise is it? How descriptive it is of the data? How hardened are those descriptions, right? So there's about 300 tests that we're doing. You can do this same principles as what we just described as early as design time. So one of the big focus really of our platform is really to help enterprises shift left and introduce all the security aspects as early as possible, but in a friendly way for developers. And that's really very, critical to us, because if you want to do shift left, it's not about taking security tools and putting them into the hands of the developers. You need specialized tools that developers use, which are integrated in their everyday tooling. And that can be your favorite IDEs, that can be your CI/CD, DevOps pipelines that you're using, and now from Postman. And this is really what the presentation today is all about. Now, before I get into the demo, the one thing this presentation and webinar is really focused on the security audit aspect of our platform, or one of the services of the platform. But once you have a great contract, as you've seen also in Postman, you can do then automated testing and contract testing. You can create mockups. You can do a lot of things because you have this description of what your API is doing. So you can take an approach that you may hear about called security as code. And what this really means is you can express in a text format, which is OpenAPI in this case. You can express, this is my API, that's what it does, this is a security into it. And those are all the different aspects of my APIs that can be used to better secure it. First at design with our security audit, then you can run some automated testing. We do a bit more than just contract testing as well, which is again complementary to Postman on what it will discover, but there we'll try to also inject some bad data and bad formats to also see if your implementation works well beyond what I call the happy path, right? And you're also testing what I call the hacky path, which is normally what people are trying to hack your API will do. They're not going to play safe, right? They're not going to play by the rules. They're not going to play by what your contract is saying. On the contrary, they're going to try all kinds of calls for discovery purposes, which are not the one you expect. And when this happens, what should happen for your API is it should really answer in a consistent manner as per the contract, without leaking information you don't want to leak, without leaking some exceptions, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what this tool will allow you to test. And because we're taking this security as code approach, we can also automatically inject some security policies in there, so we can enrich our OpenAPI file beyond the specification with some additional annotations to say, hey, for example, I want to add JSON web token validation in there, rate limiting. I want to inject security headers. I want to do bot protection. All of these expressed again as code, right? So that you can look at it in something like GitHub, you can version it, you can track it, and you can automatically inject this information again and again at scale, and then deploy protection based on that in front of your API. So that's really the full flow of the entire platform, so that you have an idea of what we do. And what I'm going to show you now is two aspects: is the audit aspect within Postman, and then this automation also within the CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so let's have a look. Demo time. So let me get out of the presentation here and also go to Postman and show you what I have in here. I'm going to do the same thing as Ken. I'm going to zoom this a bit so that never remember what the zoom is. Come on, zoom. We want to zoom in. All right, doesn't want to zoom. Okay, well, I'm not sure why, but okay. So I hope you guys can see this. So what do I have, right? I have this collection that's part of the marketplace that Postman has put together, where you're going to find this collection that is just showed, as well as the one that I'm showing now, which basically allows you to interact with our platform through its REST API. No surprise, we have a SaaS platform, and there is a REST API on top of that SaaS platform, so that you can actually invoke those different services from the platform through the REST API. So you have a documentation here that explains how this all works. And we have this one API that we have imported within that same workspace, which is here, which is called the Pixie API. So we are going to find here the definition of that API, as you were showing just now, Kin. It is also synchronized and linked to a GitHub repo. So we have put together, let me just do a little picture here. There's really, we're using GitHub here as the source of truth for all the information, which basically means we can integrate it with Postman to have a two-way synchronization between the Postman platform and, in this case, GitHub, right? We have the same thing with my IDE that I'm going to show you in a second, where I have the same two-way synchronization. And also we have attached that to GitHub Actions, just to say stay in the GitHub ecosystem. But it could be Jenkins, it can be Bamboo, it can be Azure DevOps, whichever tool you're using. So we can run that same audit, that same analysis automatically whenever we make a change to the code through any of those sources. Should it be the IDE or should it be from Postman? Okay, so this is all integrated through GitHub. So first thing is, let me show you what the tool is doing from the IDE here, and then I will show that to you also in Postman. So this is the file that we are talking about. It's also in Postman. So as you see at the top right here, you will see a little button that says 42C, okay? So if I click on this, what this is going to do is it will invoke our platform, and it will render this audit report on the contract. So here it's really what it all looks at, is really the contract itself, like all the operations, as I was saying, all the data that flows in and out, to give you this information about, okay, first of all, how did I describe security? Well, the first problem we have here is for some operations, maybe we forgot, we don't know, but there's an operation here where we don't know what the security is. So definitely we should be adding this, right? If we have the security in there, like this access token, so one of the things we're going to tell you, for example, is, okay, you're using API keys. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? It depends. It really depends on your API. It depends on the risk. But the whole goal of the audit is to give you this information that you can consume and decide, and whether, from a risk point of view, depending on what your API does, is it okay to do API key, or do I have to move to something like auth, for example? And for every single, as I mentioned before, we have about 300 of those tests that we're doing. For every one of them, we have this knowledge database to explain. So that's not only about, hey, maybe this is wrong, so we're going to remove some points from the overall score. we'll explain why we're doing that. So you'll have a description of the problem, you'll have how this can be potentially exploited, and how typically you would actually fix it. Okay, so this is true for any problem that we actually highlight and find. What else we'll highlight in here? Things related to the data. So typically, one of the things which is really critical from a security standpoint is how hardened and well described your data is, right? Kin was showing you contract validation. So typically when you do contract validation, what you're going to do is you're going to look at the response coming back, for example, and we're going to validate it against that schema, which is here. So validate that we have an ID, a user, a password, are the formats correct, et cetera, right? So as you can see here, there's some constraints about the length, for example, but there is very minimal constraints about the formats of the data. So that's typically, for example, if I take this name or this password, what the tool is going to tell me, so okay, tell me a bit more about this. It's like, you know, a name, a password, a user, all of this are strings. Like, you know, a string can be a lot of different things. So tell me more about it. So this is very important because when you add some patterns and when you add some constraints, when you do that contract validation Kin was talking about, you will have additional automated validation happening, right? So it's not the same to have something like this that say type string min length 8 than having something like this, let's say, where I also say, well, the maximum length is 64. And for some reason, I want all my passwords to only be numbers and lowercase, okay? So if I have something like this in my schema, then when we do this validation, this contract validation, not only we will validate that it's a string, but also validate the min, the max, and the pattern. So if for some reason your backend is leaking back some information through here, which has nothing to do with a password, or somebody made a mistake and started accepting some other characters which are not supposed to be allowed, et cetera, this is additional, you know, validation, which is very useful and you know, probably covers a lot of the problems from a security standpoint. A lot of the problems around security are still on the fact that we're not validating enough the information that we're receiving or sending back. This is very important. This is a key message, right? You have to validate the data that comes in through an API, but you also have to validate what you sent back. Because remember, this is an API, it's going to be exposed most likely as a public endpoint, even if you're only consuming it from maybe an internal, a specific application, which is yours, or from a mobile application. That endpoint is perfectly accessible from the internet directly without going through your application. So if you're doing any filtering in your application or anything like that, if I go straight into the API, none of that is happening. So you have to be very careful, not only about validating the inputs, you also have to be very careful about validating the outputs, okay? So from here, I can, you know, make those changes, I can recalculate my score, and because I've made some changes here and I have increased or hardened more that password, then from 48, I went all the way to 50, right? And we'll do the same thing to validate and make sure, for example, this is a very typical problem I see all the time in POCs, right? Which is we just say, hey, there is a 200, right? That's cool. So there'll be no schema attached to that. So you're going to answer 200 with nothing? Probably not, right? So you're probably missing a schema in there. Same thing for 403. There's probably a schema attached to it. So all these things that we tend, and it's very easy to forget, not put it, you know, it changes, whatever it is. If you continuously test this, then it will allow you to make sure you don't do that mistake again. And the KDB you have in here will help you understand why you're making those problems, you know, why we're flagging those as problems and how you remediate it, right? So that's what you see from our IDE. So let me just push this code now. I'm going to take this and just say, I've changed this in VS Code, okay, and save that. And I will push it to our GitHub repository and just say changed in VS Code so that you see VS Code. All right, and push that. All right, so as I said, I have synchronized this with Postman, right? So that means that I will see the updates coming as soon as this data is pushed here, right? So now, what do we have inside this collection that we are giving you? Well, we have a notion of collection also in 42Crunch. This is a folder to organize your APIs. So before you can upload anything to our platform and work with the platform, you have to create a collection. So let's do that first. Let's create a collection. So we'll create a collection called Postman 499, okay? And it has this ID, which we're going to use. And then we will create an API from Postman, right? So what this does behind the scenes in this pre-request script is it will take the schema that we have stored inside the schema, the Postman platform, and it will use that to upload that file to the platform, do the same audit we've seen from VS Code, and then we'll be able to retrieve the results, okay? So let's go back to our API here, just to make sure that it got updated. So it's still syncing right now, and we should see the results in a second. All right, it takes a bit of time, I'm not sure why, but it will come up eventually. All right, so I know it takes so much time to sync up with GitHub, but anyway, so what we're going to do is take the contents of this schema, which is what we're looking at right now, and we are going to upload it to our platform, okay? So let me just say create an API from Postman and just go and say send, right? So it's going to take the schema and upload it and create a new API. So if now, if I'm looking at that report, so what this is doing is it uploads the file to the platform and generates that same report we've seen in the IDE on the platform. Now I can retrieve and visualize that within our Postman, right? So we can go and fetch that report. It's a raw, you know, if we're looking at the raw version is not very nice because it's a big bulk of base 64 data. But if we look at it in the visualization, then we see the same data, the same score that we saw on the IDE, right? With the repartition of the by criticality of the different problems that we highlight. And we even have a summary of the number of times some of the typical problems are actually occurring, right? So we have multiple times the fact that we don't declare parameters, patterns, and we don't have some responses for 2.9, et cetera, right? And we can sort that by severity. And if you want to know more and see the details of all this, you have a link in here. And what this link is going to take you is to our platform. So let me just copy and paste here. And there we go. All right, maybe I got kicked out, most likely. No, I didn't. All right, and here we're going to see the full report. So it is not easy in the UI for Postman to try to represent all that information. So that's why we just put a link in there with the highlights. But if you want all the details of all the problems and how to fix them, all you have to do is to click on that link and you will see the same report in a different form directly on our platform. And for each, again, of the different problems that we are finding, you will get those details, the same knowledge database we have seen in the IDE with compared to the line of code. So you can browse through that information and go and correct all the different issues. You can do this from the IDE, you can do this from Postman, because this is all synchronized through GitHub. It really doesn't matter where you do that remediation from, right? But you have here direct access inside Postman to the results. So it's very easy to, every time there is a change, you do that collaboration we were, Kin was talking about, and you make changes with your team, you update something, you just, invoke this and you will get an updated report and an updated set of problems. So you can see if the changes you have made have any implications from a security standpoint, right? Now, while we were doing this, and because this is integrated with our GitHub and GitHub Actions, right? If I go to GitHub Actions, if I go to GitHub, and I look at, oh, I've closed it. Okay, that's not good. Pre-sales. Let me just. Sorry about that. It'll be easy to find. Sorry, just repositories. Here we go. All right, so we'll have some action workflows in here. And you see this commit that we did about 5 minutes ago, which has changed in VS Code, and that has kicked a build, right? And as part of that build, if we look at that build, you also have that same security testing, right? And what this is going to give you is the ability to do that exact same auditing and getting your results, etc., but as part of your CI/CD pipeline. And same thing if we look here at the end of this, and we look at the files that got imported, we will see that we got 3 files that got imported, which are synced with our repo, right? So we have, this is the repo, GitHub pre-sales platform demo. This is the main branch, and this is the name of the file, right? So those files got uploaded automatically 5 minutes ago, and we will see the same report if they're valid, if they're not valid. So I can have like a discovery process across my repo, look at all the files, upload them in one go, and keep my GitHub and my platform in sync, so I can see at any point in time what my status of my API is, and some trends. Well, here we're not going to get any trends because we just did the score, so there's no trends. We did it only once. But as the file gets again edited and changed, should it be in Postman or somewhere else, then you will see that audit happening automatically every time you commit, and you can come here and see the evolution of your score across along the timeline. Okay, and yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to show you about the integration. Kin, any comments on this you want to add?
No, it's great because it goes beyond, I think, what I see a lot of folks focusing on when it comes to security. That also it's not just scanning and access the API. It's about the design of the API, which I really like, because it's why it's moving up in the life cycle, is because people need to be thinking about it early on in the life cycle rather than later. So I like the approach. And the other part I really like is the VS Code integration, because a lot of our developers, Postman's a kind of a secondary place where they're working and testing out APIs and working with APIs, but VS Code is kind of their home. So I like the bumping around back and forth, and then the Git sync source control is really the heartbeat and core of how teams are working. So it's a nice approach.
Indeed, and by the way, if you're not using VS Code, that's okay. We also like the IntelliJ and Eclipse people, so we also do that. Not a problem. Right. So it sounds like we have a lot of questions.
Just before we jump into the Q&A, because there's a lot of questions there, I just want to put my own question out there one more time. Last question for everybody. So it's the last polling question, and if you can all I'll push it now, and hopefully in a moment you'll see it. Again, this is a multiple choice, so you probably only follow one format, but if you're doing all of them, great. But just if you can answer the questions there, best of your ability, and then we'll share the results with you shortly. So out in front on the red line there is after coding but before deployment and testing. Well, at least the good thing is you're getting it done earlier in the cycle, and then neck and neck between when coding the API, which is good to see that shift left mantra is being adopted, and the concept of the security as code is being adhered to. So great to see, practicing what we're preaching. So thanks for that. Now we're going to head over to some of the Q&A. There's been quite a lot of questions come in. So I don't know, how do you want to work it, Isabel and Kin? Can you guys see it, or do you want it to be read out to you? How do you want to take that?
Go ahead. Just go read if you want to pick up in order. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So one of the first questions in is, excuse me, if you have a number of teams that are immature in their spec design, i.e. OpenAPI, Swagger, Whistle, etc., do you find that the contract tests overwhelms them? You know, they don't know where to start and what to do. So what are some of the things that you can find earlier than the traditional DAST tooling, such as Qualys, Zap, etc., for testing? So there's probably two questions there, but the first part is, if the team is relatively new to the space and to the spec design, do you find the contract testing can be a bit challenging, or what's the best approach?
I can definitely speak to the contract part.
Go ahead.
Do you want to speak to the security part? I mean,
Yep.
It's tough. People don't know what, you know, it's the known unknowns, known, you know, known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. You know, people can't always see what all the possibilities are, all the things that should be tested. And so really you start with the known knowns. You think about why are we, you know, what are the business requirements for this API, for this contract, and let's test for those. And then you start iterating from that contract. You make sure the surface area of the contract is represented and tested for. That's the known. And you make sure that that's going to be performant. And then, but then I'll let Isabel speak to the security side, you know, how you can, what's kind of the basis you start with, and then how you can go from there.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons actually we created the audit, right? It's because indeed it is, you know, the question is, what do I have to do? It's kind of overwhelming, say, what do I have to test and what do I have to correct? So one of the key aspect of that really is this this KDB that we're giving. And what we're seeing happening at our customers is, again, people start with this with usually very, very low scores. Like the score is over 100, right? People usually start at like 5. I've seen 1, you know, in general, because they forgot to put even security in there, declare security into the OpenAPI file. But as they go and we drive them through finding, you know, what the key problems are by this criticality, and take the problems by criticality, they start within the KDB, learning about the problems, understanding why they shouldn't do A, B, and C, or why on the contrary they have to do A, B, and C, and that helps them just become better at it, right? And I think the key point is, you know, you really need to, there's a lot of education to be done, to be frank, right? And that's, we're trying to put our little, you know, grain of salt there to get this to go forward faster and better. Traditional DAST testing is a bit overwhelming. That's what people are telling us, right? At least early in the life cycle. It's because those tools, they need to learn from the, you know, they need to learn from looking at the code or looking in and crawling the information. They don't have the context of what they have to test, right? And again, there's more and more tools. So Qualys is actually a partner of ours, right? And always Zap, you have an OpenAPI now plugin, because they all come to the realization that the great advantage of having a contract again is you're not shooting in the dark about what you have to test. You know what you have to test because it's written in the contract. So the idea is to enable this virtuous circle of, you know, learning from what the findings are, enhancing our contract, do tests from our contract, finding new problems, and you iterate. You're not going to go from 5 to 100 or if you're super OpenAPI in one day, right? But as you go and learn, then the next API you're going to do, you're going to be better at it. So that's what we see happening at customers, is helping and educating, for me, is the key thing, right? Now, there is another question after that on IDOR testing?
Yeah, it's kind of a continuation of the DAST question. And I think it was probably, I think the question was put more towards Kin, but the question was really typically most developer oriented, and sorry, I'll start from the beginning. With traditional DAST testing tools to detect IDOR type findings, you have to variabilize much of the input. Typically, most developer-oriented collections don't have this level of rigor in the collection. Okay. So the person was wondering, are there tools that help address using collections in this way? and they felt that it was more for kin, but either of you feel free to answer if that's okay.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
IDOR collection. So for people who don't know what IDOR is to start with, because otherwise you're not going to understand the question nor the response. An IDOR is really a problem related to the fact that I can call an API. Let's say I have a valid token and I'm trying to get access to a resource that has an ID 123, right? Let's say it's a bank account, right? But now because I have a valid access token, a valid access to that API, for some reason, the system also lets me to go and see kin's account, which is 124, right? So IDOR are about being able to exploit the fact that there is a lack of authorization at the resource level to detect that no, Isabel cannot access account 124 because she's the owner of only of 123. So it's true that this type of testing, in order to do it properly, as you can imagine from what I just explained, you need two things. You need to have valid tokens and users. You have to know that those users have access to that information, and you have to know that those users don't have access to this other information, this other resource. So you need much more input data to automate that. We're starting to see some tools. There's an open source tool from Yelp, which actually allows you to do IDOR type testing. It's called Fuzz Lightyear. If you search for that in GitHub or Google, you're going to find it, not Buzz Lightyear, but Fuzz Lightyear, right? And they have done like a framework which allows you to put all this input data and then automate the detection of this type of problems.
Okay, very good. I love it, Fuzz Lightyear. There's a lot of you are still on, so there's a couple more questions. We'll ask a couple more, and then what we might do is we're going to write a blog post where we'll probably be able to address all the other questions subsequently or via direct email correspondence. But another question relates to the test, and are they generic rules based? In other words, are they identical to all clients?
In the audit, you mean? Yeah. So the rules are the same for everyone, right? And the audit, because this is a static analysis of the OpenAPI file. So they're specific to OpenAPI and what you can describe in OpenAPI, and it's identical to all clients. We have ways to allow you to skip some of those, or on contrary, raise the sensitivity and raise the importance of some of those rules. The other part of the platform I talked about, which is the conformance scan that will use the OpenAPI to test interactively an endpoint. This one, so there is a set of tests which are generic, but the tests are tailored based on the OpenAPI definition. So if you have 3 fields, then we do certain tests. If you have 10 fields, we'll do other tests. And those tests will depend, again, on the constraints we have put. If we have put the pattern, if we have put some limits, then we will test those limits. So the more information you give us in the contract, the more tests we will be able to do automatically, basically.
Okay, and maybe to extend that question then out to kin with Postman, the tests that are run in Postman, non-security related, are they generic, or they can be created as you wish?
Yeah, it runs in both spectrums. So you can create them, based upon specific, user acceptance, application specific. So you can make them very precise and for a specific client. But you can also, I see a lot of operational level collections that can be run because it's driven by an open API. You can run it generically, and you start seeing this emerge as part of a wider spread governance and other aspects where contract, functional, user acceptance, performance, and security tests all fall under a larger umbrella. There's oftentimes operational level collections that are more generalized for specific purposes, or for wider purposes, non-specific purposes. And so it covers the spectrum. I see it in both sides.
Cool. Okay, very good. I think at this point, we're almost at the top of the hour, folks. So what we'll do is any of the outstanding questions we can answer directly via email, and we'll also be providing a summary of the recording for tomorrow's consumption via email. We'll share the link to it. And you can see here on the screen, obviously, where to follow us on social, the respective sites. So please be sure to get following there. And we hope to see you all very soon on the next webinar. But before we go, just thanks again to Kin for joining us today, and Isabel, as ever, for putting in a great stint on the session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thanks, Kin, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.